Hi. Okay, so it's been a little while. I'm sorry. I dropped off the face of the planet for a little bit, but I'm back. Yay. And I'm back for the mid-year freakout tag. I am a little bit late to the party. I know it's past mid-year, but you know, we're here. We made it. This is my pup, one of them. Hello, this is Luna. She apparently wants to join us today, so we love that. Okay, so I have a lot of books to share. My voice is cracking. I'm not used to being back. My voice isn't used to me being back. So we're just gonna go with the flow. By the way, my name is Rain. Welcome back to my channel. So let's just dive into the questions. Let's get started. I know you've probably seen a million of these, so hopefully you still enjoy. Hello. Okay, so best book I've read so far this year. I took this to mean my favorite book I read so far this year, and that has gotta be Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This book gave me so much serotonin. It introduced me to the cozy fantasy genre, and that is currently my favorite genre. I am obsessed. It made me feel all the warm and fuzzy feelings. It's about Viv here, who is opening up a coffee shop in a town that has never heard of coffee before. She's going from being this like warrior to slowing down and kind of settling into a slower pace of life, and it's just a little slice of life. Like, there's whole chapters dedicated to adding new menu items. I love it so much. I think about it probably every single day. It's my Roman Empire, so Legends and Lattes, love, love, love. Honorable mention, Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I also think about this book a lot. I actually, by the way, 5 stars. This one I gave 4.75 just because there was a part in the middle that I felt like was a little bit slow, but I love it so much that I don't even care. The writing, chef's kiss, was impeccable in this book. I tabbed this book to death. There's so many fantastic lines, lots of words of wisdom, and I thoroughly enjoyed every second and would highly recommend both of these books. Best sequel I've read so far this year has got to be Heartstopper Volume 2. The Heartstopper series is just a 5-star series for me. I love every single book in the series. Heartstopper Volume 2 is probably my favorite book in the series, just because Heartstopper Volume 1 left on a little cliffhanger, and in this one we get to explore Charlie and Nick's relationship a little bit more, and it develops and is so sweet. If you haven't read this, it's a graphic novel and it's a boy meets boy kind of story, and you gotta read it. You will love it. It'll just absolutely melt your heart. Heartstopper by Alice Osman is a must read in my opinion. So as far as the new release that I'm excited to read so far this year that I haven't read, that would have to be Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, and that's because I loved The Only One Left by Riley Sager so much. This and Never Lie by Frida McFadden are my favorite thrillers of this year, but this one had so many plot twists. It almost could have been too many plot twists. I didn't care because I love a plot twist. If you don't mind getting absolute whiplash, I recommend this book to death. So I want to read Middle of the Night. I have heard not so good reviews about it, honestly, but I want to give it a shot for myself. I know people tend to be a little bit harder on thrillers than a lot of other genres, so I'm going to try it anyways, but I am hopeful, and that's the book I'm looking forward to reading the most as of right now, that's already out. My most anticipated release for the second half of the year is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. This is the sequel to House in the Cerulean Sea, which I dearly loved. I don't know where the story is really gonna go from here, so I'm very curious. I heard for a long time TJ Klune say in interviews and in questions on Goodreads that I read, people kept asking, like, is there going to be a sequel? Is this going to be a series? And he just kept saying that there wasn't going to be a sequel unless there was a real story to tell. and he kept saying, no, 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 there's not going to be a sequel. And now there is going to be a sequel. So that tells me there's more story to tell, which I'm really excited about. So Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. Can't wait for that to come out in September. My biggest disappointment of the year has got to be The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. This book was terrible. Like 1 star. Awful. I hated it. It disguised itself as fiction, but it was really just like a self-help book, like the most basic self-help advice you can possibly get wrapped up in like a fiction story. Like the characters would be like, you know, I heard that if you blah, 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 just like the most basic self-care or self-help rhetoric there possibly is, but just these characters saying it, and they just kept saying, you know, this one guy told me this basic self-help advice. It was terrible. It was really, really hard to get through. 1 star. I don't recommend it at all. Now, moving on to something a little more positive, because I'd much prefer to be positive. The biggest surprise of the year was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is my biggest surprise because fantasy was very new to me at the time that I read this book, and I was very skeptical about whether a fantasy was really going to be for me. I was very pleasantly surprised and absolutely adored this book. It was really accessible to me as a new fantasy reader, and it was fun, engaging. It kind of took me on a wild ride. The spice wasn't too much for me. I really am excited to read Iron Flame. Mixed reviews on Iron Flame, but I'm gonna reread Fourth Wing before I dive into Iron Flame. I'm gonna give it a fair shot. I'm really looking forward to it. My favorite new author to me is Frida McFadden. So Frida is not a new author by any stretch of the imagination. She has been writing for a very long time, and she is pumping those books out like nobody's business, honestly. I think she's had like, by the end of the year, she'll have had 3 or 4 releases. So that's crazy to me. I read The Housemaid first, and then I read The Housemaid's Secret, and then I read Never Lie. Never Lie was probably my favorite, but I liked The Housemaid's Secret just as much as I liked The Housemaid, which I think is an unpopular opinion as far as I can tell. But I adored it. I have liked every book that I've read by her so far. I eventually want to read her entire backlist. I read The Teacher this year, which I loved. It was really twisted and kind of gross. So if you don't mind something like that, then I would recommend The Teacher. If you really get the ick or easily disturbed, I wouldn't recommend it. Check your trigger warnings on all of her books. But love Frida McFadden and can't wait to read more. A book that made me cry was House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This book had me sobbing at the end. I gave it 4.75 stars. It was nearly perfect for me. There was just a little bit of the story. My baby brought me her broccoli. That was a little bit slow for me in the middle, so that bumped it down like 0.25 of a star rating, but it didn't slow it down a lot by any means, which is why it was still nearly perfect. But the ending made me sob. Like, I am not a big crier when it comes to books at all. I have only ever teared up at one other book, and that was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This book had me sobbing at the end, so I would definitely recommend it if you just need something heartwarming and sweet. Now, my next 2 questions I'm answering with the same book, which is a book that made me happy and the most beautiful book I've read this year, and that is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. Look at this cover. I mean, that is gorgeous. Gorgeous. The prettiest cover I have ever seen. I am very happy to have this book on my bookshelf. The Honey Witch is another cozy fantasy. You can tell what my favorite genre has been, but it is a story about Marigold, and she's tired of her ordinary life, and she discovers that her grandmother is the Honey Witch. So it's a witch that creates magic spells and concoctions and things out of honey. So that's kind of the way the magic is dispersed among the people, and she help the people in her town, and it's a really wholesome story. It's a romantasy, so there's a storyline with another character. It's a sapphic romance. Another character that doesn't believe in magic, and then there's this kind of bet where she bets her that she can get her to believe in the magic. It's just really, really great. It's a great love story. It also made me feel warm and fuzzy. You can tell that's like my favorite feeling. Feeling thrilled and feeling fuzzy are like my favorite things when it comes to books lately, apparently. So I really recommend The Honey Witch. It was a 5-star read for me. I gave it a 4.75 initially, and then I just kept thinking about it. Like, I cannot stop thinking about this book, and I'm really excited to reread it. And I was like, you know what? If it's giving me that feeling and I can't stop thinking about the book, it's a 5-star. So 5-star read, The Honey Witch for me. Love it. Now, what books am I excited to read for the rest of the year? I have a very long TBR and a very long TBR cart. Just a few: Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. I read the first 2 in this series, which are Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. That was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. I'm realizing I haven't talked about a lot of romances so far in this wrap up. And fantasy, especially cozy fantasy, romance, and thrillers are like my favorite genres. I read Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, and I read Delilah Green Doesn't Care. And so I still need to read Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. I love this series so much. These are all sapphic romances, and they're very, very well done. They're funny, they're heartwarming, they are well written, the characters are fleshed out, real people, and I would highly recommend them. I'm excited to read House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I'm excited to read Can't Spell Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. I still need to read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This book looked so funny to me. This is called The Happy Medium by Sarah Adler. This is a story about a con woman who cons people out of their money by convincing them that she's a medium. And then she meets this guy, and there's this romance. She goes to his farm and then has to actually convince him because she realizes that there's a real ghost on the property. So she's thrown into that scenario. I found that premise really hilarious, so I'm excited to read that. These are all my library books that I have checked out, so I'm excited to read all of these. I have The Flat Share, The Push, Gone Girl, 28 Summers, Anxious People, Paris Apartment. I recently read The Chain. That one was, I don't know, this is not what this question is about, but I read The Chain recently, and I was really engaged for the first half of the book, and then I just kind of lost interest, but I think I would recommend it. There were parts that were really hard to read about because it's a thriller about children being kidnapped, so just the fact that children were involved was hard to read about. I still did enjoy it. If you don't mind feeling like totally stressed out when you're reading, then I would recommend it. So that would be it, you guys. That is my mid-year freak out tag. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for putting up with my puppy's little paws on the floor. She always does this whenever I come film. She gets very excited to be involved. So thank you again for watching if you watched all the way to the end. If you have watched all the way to the end, please comment your favorite read of the year so far. I would really, really love to hear. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time, hopefully sooner rather than later. All right, bye.